Axios. What does it mean? It is the final words of Roman general Gnaeus Domitius Corbulo. Born on the Italian peninsula in the year AD 7, the early history of Corbulo is generally unknown. Born into a relatively wealthy and powerful senatorial family, his father served as a praetor during the rule of Emperor Tiberius, and his mother came from a family of whom members of that family had held the praetorship, where a praetor is a Roman political position given to an individual in one of two situations, either an individual who is the commander of an army, or an individual who has been elected as a magistrate. In the year AD 37, Gaius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, more commonly known as Caligula, became the emperor of Rome. Caligula was the brother-in-law to Corbulo through Corbulo's half-sister Melonia Caesonia, where in the year AD 39, Corbulo became a suffect consul. A consul during the Roman Republic was the highest political position that an individual can be elected into in the Roman Republic, where two individuals served as consul in order to have a balance of power, and a suffect consul was an individual who was elected to serve the remainder of a consul's term in the event that a consul dies while in office. Starting in 27 BC, with the transition from the Roman Republic to Imperial Rome, the consuls had lost most of their power, as most of their formal duties now belonged to the emperor, where by the time of Corbulo's service in the position of suffect consul in the year AD 39, the position was mostly that of symbolism, though still politically relevant. However, after the assassination of Caligula in AD 41, Corbulo's political service came to a halt. Following the assassination of Emperor Caligula, Emperor Claudius rose to power. 6 years later, in AD 47, Corbulo was made as the commander of Claudius's armies in Germania Inferior, an area of the world that would eventually become a Roman province located along the Rhine River. This assignment by the emperor would prove to be a difficult task for Corbulo. Not only was Germania Inferior located far away from his home back on the peninsula, Corbulo had to deal with rebellions by two of the Germanic tribes that call this area of the world home, while also commanding all of his troops in the region. During his time here, Corbulo accomplished many different tasks, one of which was an engineering project where Corbulo ordered the construction of a canal that ran between two of the rivers in the area, the aforementioned Rhine as well as the Meuse. The purpose of this canal was interesting, where there could be some benefits for connecting two rivers together, such as allowing the transports of troops and cargo between the two rivers in a specific location without having to journey across land in between the two. But Roman historians state that the primary purpose to have this canal built was to keep the troops busy and to also keep them away from the ocean that could pose dangers to the troops. As a commander of the Roman military in the region, Corbulo was, quite obviously, in charge of commanding the military, with the duties and responsibilities that come from that. The successful completion of the canal is just one example, but Corbulo was also able to defeat the Germanic tribes that rebelled against the Roman occupation through utilizing Roman army and naval squadrons, where Corbulo took the position of commander very seriously and held a very specific ideal for all those serving under him, where he enacted very specific and highly rigorous training programs to keep his troops in top shape and in line, where he held his soldiers, especially his higher ranking ones, at an incredibly high standard and was not afraid to make an example out of people to the rest of his troops. Following his assignment in Germania Inferior, Corbulo returned to Rome and stayed there for several years, where in AD 52 he became governor of Asia. No, not that Asia, this Asia, a Roman province located around modern-day Turkey, where a Roman governor was basically the chief executive of justice within a Roman province, where they were the only individual with the power to impose capital punishment, and alongside that, he was generally the one to try capital cases within his province. Corbulo held this position for a couple years until the death of Emperor Claudius in the year AD 54, where following Claudius's death, Emperor Nero rose to power. As Nero rose to power, instability in eastern provinces began to rise. The Parthian Empire held much of the land directly east of the Roman Empire, with the province of Armenia being an important location that served as a buffer state between the two empires, with the province of Armenia being a state that was controlled by and relied on the Roman Empire, where around the years of AD 52 and 53, the Parthian Empire had successfully put a candidate that they wanted to the throne of Armenia in a bid to gain control of the state. A young Nero decided to react to the Parthian advance with strength and utilized Corbulo in order to do so, where Corbulo became one of the commanders of Roman troops in the eastern provinces in order to combat the Parthians. Corbulo had gained fame among the Roman military and people because of his actions in Germania Inferior, and that was about to be expanded with his campaigns to come, where Corbulo began to amass troops and reinforce two provinces in eastern Rome. The Roman Empire originally hoped to be able to deal with this situation through diplomatic measures, where several emissaries, including some sent by Corbulo, were sent to negotiate with the Parthian Empire. As there was not yet active combat, Corbulo spent the downtime to ensure the troops are ready for when combat did break out. Or much like in Germania, Corbulo held strict measures against his troops, but at the same time held those measures for himself as well, sharing in the hardships that his troops endured and keeping himself ready and prepared for when combat breaks out. And in the year AD 58, combat did eventually break out. Corbulo commanded 3 legions as well as many auxiliaries and contingents. Corbulo divided his military in order to attack multiple locations at once and relied upon his allies and other nations to attack Armenia from other angles. This war lasted from AD 58 until AD 63, seeing victories and defeat to both the Romans and Parthians throughout the war. A large variety of sieges, attacks, counterattacks, and battles occurred throughout the duration of the war. During the war, Corbulo came to head with Consul Lucius Caesanius Pietus, who also commanded much of the Roman military in this war, where Pietus is generally considered to be a failure during his time in service, suffering massive defeats, being forced to sign humiliating treaties, and being a bad commander for his troops. Because of Pietus's failures, Rome was on the verge of defeat, where Corbulo and Pietus came head to head, where Corbulo was frustrated that he had accomplished much in this war and those achievements were undone because of the actions of Pietus, where Pietus attempted to convince Corbulo to invade Armenia again, but Corbulo refused. He stated that he did not have the authority and that the Roman military was too worn out in order to launch a successful invasion, an invasion that would just result with unnecessary casualties for Rome without much gain, and Corbulo retired to Syria to await further commands. Where later, Pietus was recalled to Rome and Corbulo was placed in charge of a new campaign into Armenia. Corbulo began to organize and command his forces once again. Corbulo eventually began to march towards Parthian forces with the expectation for more conflict, where before combat could break out, negotiations were able to happen. With the approach of Corbulo commanding such a large army, the Parthian Empire was interested in a peaceful end. Corbulo's fame as a military commander was known throughout Rome, but was known in other empires as well, where through negotiations and agreements, this war between the Romans and Parthians came to an end. While Rome did not gain much from this war, peace for a moment was established, which many consider to be an accomplishment in and of itself. Though, of course, the history of Rome and Parthia is complicated, and this peace would only last for 50 years. But Corbulo was honored by Emperor Nero to be the individual who was able to bring a conclusion to this war. Through his military actions and his leadership, peace was able to be built. Corbulo was most definitely an accomplished and generally loved man by the military and the people of Rome, enacting feelings of jealousy like that of Pietus's amongst some individuals, but commanding respect and fame nonetheless, and that fame would be Corbulo's end. In the year AD 66, Nero became suspicious of Corbulo. 2 failed plots to overthrow Nero as emperor had occurred, one of which was enacted by Corbulo's son-in-law, a senator, where because of the connection with Corbulo, alongside Corbulo's own fame amongst the Roman military and people, Nero was suspicious that Corbulo may be involved with these plots. As another conflict began to break out again in an eastern province, Corbulo's command was taken over and Corbulo was summoned to Greece, where upon arriving at a port in Greece, a messenger of Nero's arrived and gave the emperor's order to Corbulo, the order to commit suicide. Without hesitation, question, or fear, Corbulo fell upon his own sword, screaming his final words as he did so, Axios, I am worthy. The life of Corbulo is one that I personally have always found interesting. There's a lot involved with this individual, especially with his time in Germania Inferior, as well as in the AD 58 war against the Parthian Empire. A man of honor, valor, dignity, respect, and allegiance. A man born into privilege and who possessed great power, but was successful in his goals and his duties, where he earned the respect and fame of Rome for his service to the empire. Fame that will lead to his demise, but a demise done in service to the empire, to his empire.